I didn't go back to them after that. I didn't look for answers, didn't ask for explanations, didn't give anyone the chance to fix what they had already chosen to break. The moment I stepped away, something in me made a decision without asking for permission. Not a loud decision, not dramatic, just quiet and final. The silence that followed was different from anything I had felt before. It wasn't peaceful, but it wasn't chaotic either. It was empty in a way that made everything feel distant, like I was watching my own life from somewhere outside of it. The noise in my head was gone, replaced by a kind of stillness that didn't feel natural. I stopped checking my phone. Not because I didn't care, but because I already knew what I would find if I did. Messages, missed calls, explanations that would come too late to matter. Once the truth shows itself clearly, words lose their weight. They don't fix anything, they just try to reshape something that has already collapsed. The first few days felt unreal. I moved through them without thinking too much, almost like I was following a routine my body remembered even if my mind wasn't fully there. People talked to me, asked questions, expected reactions. I gave them what they needed to move on, but none of it came from anything real. At night, it came back. Not the moment itself, but the feeling of it. That exact second when everything stopped making sense. I would replay it without trying, the details sharper each time. The way she stood there, the way my brothers looked at me, the way no one rushed to explain anything. That part stayed with me more than anything else, the lack of urgency. Like losing me didn't require effort to prevent. That thought settled deep. It wasn't just betrayal. It was acceptance. They had already accepted the outcome before I even knew there was something to lose. I started noticing changes in myself that I didn't expect. Small things at first. I became more aware of people's tone, their pauses, the way they avoided certain words. Conversations felt different, like I was constantly searching for something hidden underneath what was being said. Trust didn't disappear completely, it just became conditional, limited, controlled. I stopped believing in what people showed me. I started paying attention to what they didn't. My relationship with my brothers didn't explode into arguments or confrontation. It faded. Quietly. The kind of distance that grows without needing to be acknowledged. They tried, in their own way. A few messages. A few attempts to talk. But none of it reached me. Not because I was angry, but because I couldn't see them the same way anymore. They weren't just the ones who knew. They were the ones who waited. And that difference mattered more than anything they could say now. As for her, I didn't reach out again. There were moments when I thought about it, not because I wanted her back, but because I wanted clarity. Something that would make it easier to close that part of my life without questions. But every time that thought came, it ended the same way. If she could stand there and say it wasn't simple, then she had already chosen her side long before I walked into that truth. And I wasn't part of it. Time didn't fix things. It changed them. It reshaped the way I reacted, the way I thought, the way I understood people. I became quieter, more careful with what I gave and who I gave it to. Not cold, not completely shut down, just aware in a way I had never been before. There's a difference between not trusting anyone and understanding that trust should never be given blindly. I learned that difference the hard way. The hardest part wasn't losing her. It wasn't even what I saw that night. It was realizing that everything leading up to it had been real to me, but not real in the same way for them. The conversations, the moments, the connection, it meant something to me because I believed in it. But belief doesn't make something true for both sides. That realization stayed. Sometimes I wondered how long it had been like that. How many moments I had lived through that were already different behind the surface. But those questions didn't lead anywhere useful. They only pulled me back into something I had already walked away from. So I stopped asking. I didn't need to know everything. I had seen enough. What changed the most was how I saw myself. For a while, I questioned everything I had done, every decision I made, every sign I ignored. It's easy to turn betrayal inward, to make it feel like something you could have prevented if you had just been more aware, more careful, less trusting. But that kind of thinking doesn't lead to truth. It leads to blame without direction. Eventually, I understood something simple. Trusting someone isn't a mistake. Giving your time, your attention, your belief, that isn't weakness. The mistake is assuming that everyone values those things the same way you do. That's where everything breaks. I didn't become someone who avoids connection. I just became someone who sees it differently. I don't rush into it. I don't build it on assumptions. And I don't ignore the small things anymore, because the small things are where the truth usually hides. That night didn't destroy me. But it removed something I'll never get back. The ability to trust without hesitation. And once that's gone, everything else changes with it. I didn't just lose people. I lost the version of myself that believed people couldn't do something like that to me. And that version of me isn't coming back. The moment they said I would understand when I saw it, something inside me refused to settle. I tried to act normal, tried to keep my reactions under control, but my thoughts wouldn't slow down. It felt like everything I had ignored until now was suddenly demanding attention all at once. Every strange look, every delayed reply, every quiet whisper, it all started lining up in ways I didn't want to accept. I kept telling myself there had to be another explanation. There always is. People don't just betray you without signs, without reasons you can clearly point at. But the problem was, the signs were there. I had seen them. I just chose not to believe they meant anything. That night, I couldn't sit still. Even though they hadn't said when or how they were going to show me whatever this was, the air in the house felt different. It was tense, like something was already in motion behind the scenes. My brothers weren't acting like themselves. They weren't angry, they weren't emotional, they were controlled. Too controlled. Like they had already accepted something I hadn't even seen yet. I tried talking to them again, hoping maybe they would explain, or at least give me something to hold on to. But every question I asked was met with the same response, short, vague, and empty. Just wait. That was all they would say. Just wait. Waiting is the worst part when your mind is already turning against you. I picked up my phone and stared at her name. For a moment, I hesitated. I didn't want to sound paranoid, didn't want to start a conversation that would make me look insecure. But at the same time, I needed to hear her voice. I needed something real to push back against everything building in my head. It rang longer than usual. Each second felt heavier, stretching out in a way that made me more aware of the silence around me. When she finally answered, her voice sounded normal at first. Calm. Maybe a little too calm. Hey, she said. Hey, I replied, trying to match her tone. What are you doing? There was a pause after that. Not long, but enough to feel unnatural. Like she was choosing her words carefully. Are you okay? She asked. That question caught me off guard. I hadn't said anything that would suggest I wasn't. Or maybe I had, without realizing it. Yeah, I said quickly. Why wouldn't I be? No reason, she replied. You just sound different. Different. That word stuck with me. Because I felt it too. Everything felt different. We talked a little longer, but it didn't feel the same. The conversation didn't flow the way it used to. There were gaps, moments where neither of us said anything. And in those gaps, my thoughts got louder. I started paying attention to every detail, her tone, her breathing, the way she responded just a second too late. At one point, I heard something faint on her side. A sound in the background. It wasn't clear, but it didn't sound like she was alone. I froze for a second, listening more carefully. What was that? I asked. What? She replied immediately. That noise. Are you with someone? No, she said, almost too fast. It's just the TV. The answer came so quickly it didn't feel natural. And the more I thought about it, the less it made sense. She never kept the TV loud when she was on calls. It was one of those small habits I knew without thinking. I didn't push further. Not because I believed her, but because I didn't know what I would do if she hesitated again. After we hung up, I sat there staring at my phone, replaying the conversation in my head. Something wasn't right. It wasn't just a feeling anymore. It was details, real, clear details that didn't match up. And then something else hit me. The timing. I looked around. One of my brothers wasn't in the room anymore. I hadn't even noticed when he left. The other was sitting quietly, scrolling through his phone like nothing mattered. Like this was just another normal night. My chest tightened. I stood up and walked toward the hallway, trying to stay calm, trying not to let my thoughts take control. I didn't know what I was looking for, but I knew I couldn't just sit there anymore pretending everything was fine. As I got closer to the back of the house, I heard something again. Not whispers this time, but movement. Subtle, quiet, but there. My steps slowed. Every instinct told me to stop, to turn around, to avoid whatever was ahead. But I didn't. I moved closer, carefully, until I reached the point where I could hear clearly. And then I heard it. A voice. Not loud, not clear enough to catch every word, but enough to recognize it. My heart dropped. I knew that voice. But it didn't make sense. It couldn't make sense. I stood there, frozen, trying to convince myself I was wrong. That my mind was playing tricks on me, connecting things that weren't connected. Because if I was right, then everything I had been trying to ignore wasn't just real, it was worse than I imagined. I stepped back slowly, my breathing uneven, my thoughts completely out of control now. I didn't go further. I couldn't. Not yet. I returned to the front, where my brother was still sitting. He looked up at me for a second, studying my face like he already knew what I was thinking. Neither of us said anything. The silence between us wasn't empty anymore. It was heavy with something unspoken, something waiting to be confirmed. A few seconds later, the other brother came back. Calm. Collected. Like nothing had happened. That was the moment it hit me. They already knew. Whatever was going on, whatever I was starting to realize, they weren't surprised by it. They had been watching it unfold. And I was the last one to see it. I looked at them, my voice low but unsteady. What is this? They didn't answer right away. They just looked at each other again, that same silent exchange that now felt impossible to ignore. Then one of them stood up. It's time, he said. No explanation. No warning. Just those two words. And this time, I didn't ask any more questions. Because deep down, I already knew, whatever they were about to show me was going to confirm everything I was afraid of. I didn't say anything when they told me it was time. There was no point asking questions anymore because the answers were already waiting somewhere ahead of me. I could feel it. Not curiosity, not confusion, just a heavy certainty that whatever I was about to face would change everything in a way I couldn't undo. They walked ahead and I followed. Every step felt slower than it should have, like my body was resisting even though my mind kept pushing forward. The silence between us wasn't normal. It wasn't the kind of silence you get when there's nothing to say. It was the kind where everything has already been said, just not out loud. My heart was beating harder now, but not fast, heavy. Each beat felt like a warning, like something inside me was trying to prepare me for impact. I kept thinking back to everything that had led up to this moment. The questions, the looks, the distance, the lies that didn't sound like lies until now. It all came together in a way that felt too clear. We stopped. One of them reached for the door. He didn't rush, didn't hesitate. Just a simple movement, like opening that door was something he had already done 100 times in his mind. I stood behind him, staring at the handle, knowing that once it opened, there was no going back to not knowing. The door opened. At first, I didn't fully process what I was seeing. My mind didn't allow it. It tried to reshape it into something else, something harmless, something that made sense. But reality doesn't bend like that. It stays exactly as it is, no matter how much you wish it didn't. And then it hit me. She was there. Not just present, but involved in something she was never supposed to be part of. Something that didn't belong to me anymore. Something that made every memory I had with her feel like it had been built on something false. For a second, everything went completely silent. Not outside, inside me. Like my thoughts just stopped working. I wasn't angry yet. I wasn't even sad. I was just blank. Because the mind doesn't immediately accept something that destroys its own reality. I looked at her, waiting for something, anything, that would prove this wasn't what it looked like. Some reaction, some explanation, some sign that there was a misunderstanding. But there was nothing. No panic. No shock. Just a stillness that felt worse than any reaction she could have given. Then I looked at my brothers. That's when the second part of the truth settled in. They weren't surprised. They weren't reacting. They were watching me. Watching me take it in. Watching me understand. That realization hurt more than what I had just seen. Because it meant this wasn't something they had just discovered. This wasn't sudden. This had been happening long enough for them to accept it, long enough for them to plan this moment. You see now, one of them said quietly. His voice didn't carry anger or sympathy. It was neutral. Controlled. I wanted to respond, but the words didn't come out right. How long? That's all I managed to say. No one answered immediately. The silence stretched again, but this time it wasn't empty, it was filled with everything they weren't saying. Finally, one of them spoke. Long enough. Those 2 words did more damage than a full explanation ever could. I felt something shift inside me then. The numbness started to crack, and underneath it was something sharper. Not just anger, something deeper. A kind of betrayal that doesn't stay on the surface. It sinks in and spreads. I looked back at her. You couldn't even tell me. My voice sounded unfamiliar, like it didn't belong to me anymore. She didn't step forward. Didn't try to fix it. It wasn't that simple, she said. That answer made everything worse. Because it meant she had reasons. Justifications. A way to make this feel acceptable in her own mind. I let out a short breath, almost a laugh, but there was no humor in it. It looks pretty simple from here. No one argued with that. I turned back to my brothers. And you? I asked. You knew about this? They didn't deny it. We found out, one of them said. We didn't want to tell you without showing you. That explanation didn't feel right. It didn't feel complete. There was something missing, something they weren't admitting. Found out? I repeated. Or were you part of it? That question changed the atmosphere immediately. Not dramatically, not loudly, but enough to feel. A small shift in their expressions. A pause that lasted just a little too long. And in that pause, I got my answer. Not fully. Not clearly. But enough. I stepped back slightly, putting distance between myself and all of them. The room felt smaller now, like the air had been taken out of it. I couldn't stay there. Not with them. Not with what I had just seen. This was a mistake, I said, more to myself than to anyone else. All of it. No one stopped me when I turned away. No one tried to explain further. No one tried to fix what had just been broken. Because some things don't have explanations that make them easier to accept. As I walked out, I realized something that hurt more than everything else combined. It wasn't just that she had betrayed me. It wasn't just that my brothers knew. It was that all of them had crossed a line together, whether directly or indirectly, and none of them thought I deserved the truth until now. That night didn't just change how I saw them. It changed how I saw everything. Because once you realize the people closest to you can hide something like that, you stop believing in anything the same way again. I never thought the people I trusted the most would be the ones who made me question everything about my life. Back then, things felt simple. Maybe not perfect, but stable enough that I never had to look over my shoulder or second-guess the people around me. My 2 brothers were the kind everyone respected, protective, calm, always present when things went wrong. Growing up, I leaned on them more than anyone. They weren't just family, they were the kind of people you believe would never let anything bad reach you. And then there was her. She came into my life quietly, without drama, without chaos. It felt natural, like something that was always meant to happen. We didn't rush anything, didn't force emotions. It built slowly, and maybe that's why I trusted it so deeply. She understood me in a way most people didn't. Conversations felt effortless. Silence felt comfortable. I never had to pretend around her. At first, my brothers seemed fine with it. They didn't question her, didn't interfere. In fact, They acted like they approved, which mattered more to me than I realized at the time. Their approval made everything feel solid, like there was nothing to worry about. No hidden tension, no resistance. Just acceptance. But things don't fall apart all at once. It starts with small shifts. Things you notice but ignore because you don't want to believe they mean anything. It began with my brothers asking questions they never used to ask. Casual at first, almost harmless. Where was I going? Who was I meeting? When would I be back? It didn't feel like concern, it felt like they were trying to keep track of something. I brushed it off. Told myself I was overthinking. Then it got stranger. I'd catch them exchanging looks when her name came up. Not obvious, just quick glances, like silent conversations happening right in front of me. If I asked, they'd laugh it off or change the subject. It wasn't enough to accuse them of anything, but it was enough to sit in the back of my mind and grow. She changed too, but in ways that were harder to explain. She was still there, still talking to me, still smiling, but something felt slightly off. Replies took longer. Calls ended quicker. Sometimes she seemed distracted, like her attention was somewhere else even when she was right in front of me. When I asked if something was wrong, she'd say no without hesitation. Too quickly, almost like she had already prepared that answer. I tried to ignore it. I really did. Because once you start questioning people you love, everything becomes unstable. Every word, every action starts to feel like it has a hidden meaning. I didn't want that. I wanted things to stay the way they were. But there were moments that didn't let me ignore it. One night, I woke up to the sound of voices. Low, quiet, just enough to pull me out of sleep. At first, I thought I was imagining it. But then I heard it again, whispering, coming from down the hall. I stepped out of my room, trying not to make noise. The house was dark, but there was a faint light coming from the living area. I moved closer, slowly, not even sure what I was expecting to find. As I got near, the voices stopped. Completely. Like whoever was talking knew someone was there. That silence felt heavier than the whispers. I stood there for a moment, waiting, listening. Nothing. Just that quiet, uncomfortable stillness. Then one of my brothers walked out, acting normal, like nothing had happened. He looked at me, asked why I was awake. His tone was casual, but something about it felt forced. I said I heard something. He shrugged it off, said I must have been dreaming. I wanted to believe him. I really did. But the way he avoided eye contact, the way he ended the conversation quickly, it didn't sit right. After that, things became harder to ignore. There were times I'd call her and it would go unanswered, only for her to text back later saying she was busy. That wasn't unusual on its own, but it started happening more often. And the timing, it didn't make sense sometimes. I'd be at home, both my brothers around, and suddenly one of them would step out. Not long after, she'd go quiet too. Coincidence, I told myself. It had to be, but doubt doesn't stay quiet once it starts growing. It spreads into everything. I started noticing patterns. Small ones, but consistent. Moments where things lined up just enough to make me uncomfortable. I tried to push it away, tried to focus on what I could prove instead of what I felt. Because feelings can lie. Suspicion can destroy things that were never broken to begin with. Still, there was this constant pressure building inside me. Like something was just out of reach, something I wasn't seeing clearly. Then came the moment that changed everything. That evening felt normal at first. Nothing unusual, nothing tense. We sat together for a while, barely talking. The silence wasn't peaceful, it was heavy, like something was waiting to happen. I could feel it, even if I didn't understand it. One of my brothers looked at me, then at the other. Another one of those silent exchanges. This time, it didn't feel subtle. It felt deliberate.